Welcome to day 3 of Maha Uncensored. Today's chapter is personal for me. Some years ago, I lost the love of my life to cancer. I dedicate today to her memory and to the millions of Americans out there fighting for their lives. While I was filming this chapter, my friend Dr. Nasha Winters, herself a cancer survivor, said something that really struck me. An educated patient is an empowered patient, is a difficult to kill patient. If you or a loved one are in a battle with cancer, please take notes. We also have available an official viewer's guide for Maha Uncensored with summaries, key takeaways, full speaker list, and additional resources for each chapter. I would highly recommend getting that. Have it open while you watch. Refer back to it when you need to. If you miss anything, the key takeaways are all right there. At 149 pages, it's a ton of value. It's free when you purchase the full Maha Uncensored documentary. Just scroll down and you can learn more. This is Rethinking Cancer, the Hidden Pathways to Hope.
I find it an extraordinary opportunity whenever we come into crisis to say, where am I right this second? And why am I here? I'm here because decades ago, my parents fell in love and they created an opening for life in their relationship. And I decided to come through that portal. And I came through with an animated energy force, and I interacted suddenly with a particle moment of biology. Light energy turning from waveform into particle, becoming solid, and I'm in that. And that is the reality of the situation. I am an ancient soul in a particle moment of a light being, and I'm here on purpose, showed up through my parental line, through my ancestral line, on purpose to be a part of the human experience right now as we stand at the tipping point of our survival or extinction. Well, different foundation now to work from. Should I do chemo? Should I not? Boom, that's where I like to start with my patients. Now, what are you experiencing right now?
My name is Nasha Winters. I'm a naturopathic oncologist, and I specialize in gathering stories of people to understand the biology and the biography of their life and how they ended up with a cancer or chronic illness diagnosis. And then I help them determine a sure path forward through a methodology I've developed over three or so decades. When someone shows up with a diagnosis of cancer, no one's asking, why do you have cancer? We still default to say, it's just bad luck, it's just bad genes. They don't get curious. They don't say, well, what else? What else? What else? What else? That's what I get to do with folks, is help them understand their what else. And in the book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, I help people start to evaluate that for themselves. I've said this so many times, but an educated patient is an empowered patient, is a difficult to kill patient, whether it's cancer or any other chronic illness.
The majority of the patients that come for Hope for Cancer treatment centers are stage 3 or 4. 10 years ago, it was 85% of our patients were stage 4 or advanced stage 3. Now, in 2025, there's a lot more awareness, and that percentage is down to 70% of our patients are stage 3 or 4. So my goal is that patients or people become aware of complementary, alternative, integrative cancer therapy. And if you look at the NCI, the National Cancer Institute website, there's no integrative oncology in the NCI structure. And cancer prevention is all the way down on the left-hand corner. So very little importance is given to cancer prevention. And as we know in health and wellness and healing, prevention is key.
And there's no other model that is as effective as not only preventing, but treating and reversing chronic illness by dealing with the root causes. There's not a lot of understanding of how the body works as a system. So functional medicine is, I think, the first attempt to try to describe how the body is organized and how these systems interact, from your gut microbiome and your intestinal system to your immune system to your energy system, how you make energy in your mitochondria. So it's basically designed to understand the body as a network basically a network of networks, a biological system, and that system either is in balance or out of balance. And when that system is out of balance, disease occurs.
Maybe we are looking at the wrong thing. Maybe we should be looking at the environment in which those cancer cells are growing versus the cancer cells themselves.
A human body is made up of some 50 to 70 trillion human cells. A trillion is a massive number. 50 trillion is this extraordinary number that none of us in a daily life can really comprehend. One tumor cell, and now you're a cancer patient. If you are going to be so full of hubris that you'd even say the word cancer, then you better educate quickly that this is just a word. It describes one cell that got separated from the whole. It is actually the loneliest cell in your body. And in its loneliness, it accumulated damage. It got so damaged it could no longer kill itself, which is a natural defense mechanism called apoptosis or programmed cell suicide.
They tend to stop listening to the control signals of the body of apoptosis. The cell death that's programmed within our cells is under the influence of our mitochondria. And most of us taking a course in biology, even in 6th grade, we might have learned about these little organs within our cells, these organelles. But the mitochondria were what we all were taught were just our little powerhouses. They were what make ATP, the energy for life. Well, we've learned probably in the last 3 decades that they do a heck of a lot more than just that.
Now so much research has been showing that the mitochondria is really the core key component, and not just being the powerhouse, but by providing enough ATP and energy, then other cellular processes like autophagy, cellular regeneration, all these things can actually function.
Dr. Otto Warburg was suspecting something back in the 1920s when he noticed that the mitochondria of patients with cancer in their cancer cells looked very different than the mitochondria of healthy cells and in those people without cancer. Otto Warburg said, wait a minute, the genes are involved, but they're not where the story begins. They're a downstream effect of something happening upstream, which is at the level of our mitochondria.
And if you start to read cancer studies, you'll see the Warburg effect quite a bit. This is what cancer is. This is cancer cells lose the ability to make energy appropriately. Anybody looking to have strong vitality and life force, you really want to be thinking, how can you have a strong mitochondria?
You need energy to power your digestion, your immunity, your brain function. So by restoring mitochondrial functioning through detoxification, you see a lot of the other systems come on board. There's a lot of different mitochondrial poisons. Heavy metals are in particular shown in the research to poison the mitochondria and our body's ability to produce energy, with air being the main way of entry into our body. And after that, it's probably water. You're showering water every day that has different chemicals and heavy metals. And then our food, a lot of vegetables, and the soil can have lead-based and arsenic-based pesticides that were used in them, not to mention our makeup and beauty products as well. Heavy metals are something that a lot of people just don't think about, how that's profoundly affecting your health.
The level of toxicity in the environment has just risen so high. Every year there's more pesticides being sprayed on our crops. Every year the mercury continues to accumulate in the ocean. The people who get wise to this and start to change what they're eating, change what they're drinking, change how they're living, start detoxifying their body to deal with the toxic burden that is insidiously undermining their health and well-being, those people are thriving.
People will say, well, everything's toxic. Everything is toxic. Fine, maybe it is. Maybe everything is toxic on some level. When you're younger and you're healthier, your body's equipped to handle that. So you're exposed to toxins, you're eating junk, you're breathing junk, you're around junk, your body is navigating that well. Over the years, that stuff compounds. It compounds and it piles up, and as we age, your body gets less equipped to navigate and deal with that and manage it.
So you can start to tie the puzzle pieces together that what's happening here is we're dealing with a low energy epidemic. People literally don't have the energy required to live their best lives, to feel healthy, to feel motivated, to feel confident. And then when people's lives start to fall apart and they seek help, what the mainstream does is blame them for the problem. Well, you're lazy, you don't have enough willpower, you don't have enough discipline, you eat too many calories. Like, they basically treat them like slobs and tell them that it's all their fault. but it's not their fault. They just don't have enough energy.
When the mitochondria aren't working well, cancer really takes off. Cancer starts to switch the metabolic functioning of those cells from a certain fuel source to another. They start to choose to use things like glucose in a much higher level than the healthy cells, to anywhere from 10 times to 200 times the amount.
And this is why a lot of cancer patients crave sugar, because their cells, their cancer cells, will create receptors 40 to 50 times the normal cell so they can pull in more sugar. Cancer cells have shifted their metabolism from mitochondrial functioning to what's called the glycolytic pathway. It's a very old pathway that loves sugar.
The common soil from which all chronic disease is springing, for the most part, what I refer to as these plagues of prosperity, diseases that our ancestors never knew. You know, these modern cancers, Alzheimer's disease, type 2 diabetes, these are all diseases of civilization, and while they seem unrelated to each other, they all share one common cause. Again, that little known problem called insulin resistance.
The first domino to fall, which leads to metabolic dysfunction, is high levels of insulin. Insulin is not bad unless insulin is being called every single day. It is kind of the bully of your hormones. When insulin is around, other hormones go into hiding, which are your fat-burning hormones.
We now live in a culture where what was once an infrequent and modest rise in blood sugar is now a constant increase in blood sugar. So let's just imagine the average individual wakes up in the morning, finally overnight, while they've been fasting, while they've been sleeping, insulin has had a chance to come down, which allows the body to kind of reset its insulin sensitivity. But what do? We immediately spike our blood sugar with some sugar coffee, a bagel, and some other kind of sweets. So it's immediately a very starchy, sugary, high-carb breakfast. So insulin skyrockets. And it will take insulin 3 to 4 hours before it comes back down. Unfortunately, the person an hour or two after their breakfast, let's say 2 hours, they now feel like they're ready for their mid-morning snack. And so they bump it up again. And then they do the same with lunch, their afternoon snack, with dinner, and then of course their bedtime snack. And so the average individual is spending every waking moment in a state of elevated insulin.
The 93% of Americans that are metabolically unhealthy, they're in a keto deficiency. They forgot how to burn fat. So keto is essential for them to switch from burning sugar to burning fat. There's nothing new about it. It's just nuanced or new to some people, but it's a metabolic process that has been around since humans have existed. All of our ancestors did keto. How do I know this? They didn't have food all the time. They had to fast. When you fast, you go into ketosis.
There were a few accidental things that happened along the way that kind of bought me time. I ended up fasting, not on purpose, not knowingly, but out of necessity. I was too sick to eat. They had missed it for many months. I was in and out of the emergency room multiple times, and by the time they did figure out what was going on, I was too sick to even take on a single dose of chemotherapy. So I accidentally ended up fasting for almost 2.5 months. And that, in retrospect, is likely one of the biggest things that changed the dynamic for me.
If you stop eating, then this process called autophagy is when your body basically finds a method to recycle bad byproducts that you've produced, oxidative stress, free radicals that can cause inflammation, other things, and it uses that as energy. Why is that important? If you remove a bad cell in the body has to say, I need to reproduce a new progeny. It has the correct signal to produce that new progeny and now regenerate. That's why we heal on a daily basis from everything. It's its natural endogenous ability to regenerate.
Cancer is a condition that's been in your body for years. We all have cancer cells, as you know, and you have anti-cancer cells, and you have antioxidants, you have free radicals. I'm describing the body, which I really related to, of the body being intelligently designed, and it's designed to heal. From your liver to your heart, to your cuts, to your bones. Give it what it needs, the nutrients, get all the bad stuff out, give it, homeostasis and balance, and it'll heal.
When our cells are given everything it needs, it thrives. It already knows to connect and communicate with other cells. So this all comes down to knowing what message are we giving to our cells. If our cells are not given the right signals, it thinks that it's in danger. It's going to hunker down, it's going to turn on inflammation, it's going to shut down our immune system, it'll shut down our mitochondria.
We're all inflamed today. We pretty much live on planet Earth. We die of inflammatory diseases today, not infectious diseases, typically. You know, we were at a time where hygiene didn't exist. So we died from issues of hygiene and infectious processes then, where today we die more of inflammatory processes.
I had a patient who had severe psoriatic arthritis, which is a terrible condition with arthritis and skin rashes. She had reflux, she had severe irritable bowel, she had depression, she had prediabetes, and she was just suffering. All these conditions that I mentioned, from depression to prediabetes to psoriatic arthritis to gut issues, are all inflammatory diseases. And most of the inflammation was coming from her microbiome. I basically reset her gut. I repopulated her gut with healthy bacteria. I gave her some basic nutritional support. And within 6 weeks, she came back and every symptom had gone away, and she'd gotten off all her medications, including one that was $50,000 a year for her psoriatic arthritis. And I didn't tell her to get off her medications. She just did that on her own because she felt so good and realized she had all of these problems resolved simply by doing simple dietary changes, a little bit of a gut reset, and a few simple nutritional supplements.
What does gut disturbance or dysfunction mean? It means we have a bacterial issue. Our intestinal tract is primarily aerobic and anaerobic bacteria. We primarily need anaerobic, what we call anaerobic microflora. The problem is when we overuse antibiotics in our society, then we start to have a major problem with the gut terrain and the gut biome not being appropriate for anaerobic microflora, for example. And once we lose the terrain and the biome, those bacteria do not have a home, and they cannot create communities of bacteria that can then digest food properly and all the normal functions of our gut. And that includes immune function.
This is not a genetic anomaly or a genetic epidemic. There's no such thing. What did that kid eat? Oh, Twinkies, ding-dongs, and ho-hos, and fast food, and frozen food. And what else did happen to this? Oh, he was on antibiotics his whole young life. He destroyed his gut microbiome. He inflamed his gut to such a degree that there was a leakiness associated with inflammation of the lining. The epithelial lining now separates, and now things can get in, undigested proteins, various microbial life forms entering into areas of the body they never have access to, simply because we've been obliterated by these antibiotics.
I believe that cancer is an opportunistic disease, and given the right terrain or the wrong terrain for cancer to be found, it takes that disease, imbalanced microbiome, terrain, and then the tumor forms as a representation of a dysfunction or dysfunctions in the body. By the way, no one in the history of oncology has seen cancer cells move from one organ to another, metastasize. That has never been seen in vivo. How can a cancer cell from the colon metastasize and survive in a distant organ, like the lung and the liver? It's not a lung cell, it's not a liver cell. What we do know now, according to studies that were published, is that the cancer cells migrates, metastasizes to the distant organ with its buddies, the parasites, the heavy metals.
If you look into science studies and things like that, it'll say 30% of people with cancer have parasites. But when I speak to some of the leading people in the world that are helping people heal cancer and stage 4 cancer, they say that's absolutely not true. They say 99.9% of people who have cancer have parasites. They go hand in hand.
This makes sense, right? It makes sense because the same molecular mechanisms that lead to certain types of disease are found in diseases like cancer. Cancer cells are rapidly dividing. Do you know any infectious substance that's rapidly dividing, like a virus or a bacteria or a parasite? Cancer cells stay in their early state. They don't differentiate into different cell types down the road. They're stuck in their developmental pathway. And when you combine those things together, rapidly dividing, not differentiating, but staying in that early proliferative state and then not dying, you develop tumors.
I love when someone says, hey, Tommy got cancer. Joey got prostate cancer. I'm always like, no, you don't catch cancer. Cancer is an end stage, in my opinion, from inflammation, toxicity, deregulation. So how do we get the train on the tracks or keep the train from falling off? Well, as a biologic dentist, I'm here to tell you that you better take a look in your mouth. And it's interesting, it's like, what does the mouth have to do with cancer? Well, gum disease is the body's #1 source of chronic low-grade inflammation. As a matter of fact, there are gum disease bacteria that cling to cancer-fighting cells in the body and turn it off.
Every preventive approach, every wellness approach, every cancer approach should have a biological dental assessment. And that should begin with a cone beam. It's called a 3D CT cone beam scan. It takes 10 minutes to do, and there the biological dentist can truly assess all dental toxins that can be present and hidden from a plain dental x-ray.
Think about how you take care of your car versus how you take care of yourself. We tend to go to the doctor and go, well, if insurance isn't covering that, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'll wait till it's a problem. You would never do that with your car. People aren't used to spending cash on their health, so there's a lot of different education that needs to happen here. And here's what I love so much. It's actually a very inexpensive way to live. People think that health optimization and longevity is expensive, but when you really peel back the onion, you go, what would you need to do if you wanted to make a dramatic impact on your health? You wanted to take the biggest rocks, the biggest needle movers, what would they be? They're actually inexpensive or free. It's hard to prioritize them because I always think if you're not getting great sleep, everything else is a problem. So I always would start with sleep and recovery as a foundation. Like, we've got to have good sleep.
What was it like before we created all of this technology that allowed us to get away with things that our biology isn't optimized for? Okay, so our ancestors rose with the sun, they were active during the day, and then they went to sleep when it was dark. And if they stayed up, it was around warm firelight. And that's very important because the infrared and the red light from the firelight is actually very healing. Compare that to today. You can buy blackout curtains, you can live in a basement, you can sleep all day, you can work all night. It's a recipe for disaster.
I always joke, you don't listen to your body, you will. It's just a matter of time. We're wired as a species, particularly in Western culture, to really disconnect from our bodies. It is a cultural phenomenon of really disconnect from the body. And so understanding how trauma works and how you have to reconnect to the body is the foundation for health.
There's something known as the Adverse Childhood Event Score. How many of these significant events were you exposed to before the age of 18? It's a 1 to 10 scale. And if you've got 3 or more experiences of that scale, you have a much higher incidence of cancer and chronic illness at a younger and younger age, because it rewires your immune system, it rewires your nervous system, and it makes you more vulnerable to these exposures.
That foundational understanding about how trauma and health have to be put together. But getting people to do it is not going to be easy, because it's hard and it doesn't feel good. But neither does dying of cancer.
Like Bruce Lipton, cellular biologist, one of the most brilliant men you could ever meet, talks about living in fight or flight in a permanent state in the cells too, depleting our life force, rather than living in growth and healing and revitalization and regeneration.
And one of the most profound things that happens in my practice is we share this kind of information with patients. We get them to think about what really matters to them and show them what their choices are doing to their health. Suddenly they will shift and their body will change and their mind will change. They rethink a relationship or they renegotiate a business deal.
So I don't often go into this sort of esoteric discussion with everybody, but I think it's really worth speaking to. We imprint on each other on many levels. So you've probably seen the images by Alex Gray. If anyone's ever taken a medical school class, that is your textbook. Grey's Anatomy. These beautiful artistic drawings of our organs and our tissues in our body. Alex Grey he's of the lineage of the people of the Grey's Anatomy, but he draws the anatomy from not just the physical, but also the energetic. And his artwork is just stunning. He's spent a lot of time in the psychedelic world, and so he sees and draws what he sees into these beautiful patterns. This one it's called The Kiss. It's such a beautiful and potent image. It's a drawing of basically the vascular, the nerve endings, and even the energetic field around two people as they kiss. And you just see it in real time. We've been able to measure that off people with things like Kirlian photography, we've been able to gather current off people from 3 to 6 feet out of their bodies. I can measure your energetic field and how it interacts with mine. So it sounds so esoteric, but I tell you this because it's one of the most overlooked terrain drops, is knowing not only what you're putting in, on, and around your body, but who.
We make plans. You plan, you play, you play, you plan. But on some random Wednesday afternoon when life bites you on the ass and everything changes, what you thought was going to be isn't. So you're gonna kick and scream and say, why me, Lord? But then at some point, you have to play the hand that's been dealt you if you wanna move forward and not get cemented in being bitter and angry with what was supposed to be. Because nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what's gonna happen 5 minutes from now, let alone the rest of our lives. And what I realized that what happened to me has happened to millions of Americans. I was not unique. Many people are misdiagnosed and mistreated in this country. And for some, the unfortunate consequence of that is late-stage cancer diagnosis. Particularly with women, they feel like, they've got so much on their plate being caregivers that they keep pushing aside these subtle whisper symptoms. They know something's off, but they feel like it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. And they got other responsibilities.
When you start tearing down the fact that we have all these things that we think we are or do or whatever, when it comes down to it, the only thing in my mind that is important is relationships and love and communication. I was a strong person. I was the one that always did for everybody else. And then I found myself in this position where I couldn't do back. I really did have to learn to receive love and receive help and receive just the kindness of people wanting to be there because they loved me, because I had built a relationship with them over the time.
The experiences in the hospitals that I felt like really fulfilled that oath, that Hippocratic oath that I took saying I was going to do no harm, was the dying moments. When my patients suddenly hit that terminal point where it was clear that there was no more intervention options. It was time for, quality of life rather than quantity of life. It was time for dignity, not more intervention. At that moment, we tend to peel off all the layers. To get eligible for hospice care in the United States, you have to have a prognosis of a chronic condition that would suggest that you're going to die in less than 6 months. Then your insurance company or Medicare will kick in and cover your hospice care. It's very common that within those first few weeks, as we peel away all the medicines, peel away all of this, put them back in their homes, surround them by loved ones, have the pastor showing up every week, and we get multi-generational experience around the patient again. Suddenly the patient's rallied, suddenly the biology is normalized, suddenly you're 3 months in and you're realizing this patient's better than they've been in years, and they just took a trip to the Grand Canyon, and chance of that person dying in the next few months is 0, and so we better hurry up and discharge that person from hospice before they run out of that. It's just at every level of human biology, we see human touch, interaction, spiritual connection create life. And the effects that has in a hospice setting are pretty profound. You start to wonder, why did we wait till the last few seconds of this person's life to create that? This is a common scenario. You're looking at a significant portion of patients that will very much stabilize as they come out of that hospital pharmaceutical deluge.
My job with Dory is to give her joy every day. How many bad days would I want her to have had because of me? And the reality is that we're all terminal. We're all going to die. So it's bringing out the best in me and learning how to wholeheartedly, without reservation, give someone my heart, regardless of the length of their life.
Realizing my outcome, I have a great attitude. I feel like I'm gonna live forever just like anybody else, but the truth is, there's changes that had to happen for this to transpire in both of us. His journey was, a little bit different. Mine came with, this condition that, is a life-threatening condition, so it forces you to look at things a little bit differently. I want to live in gratitude. I want to live in joy. Every day, my job should be to wake up and seek joy, not just for myself, but for the people that I'm involved with, for him, for you, for anybody that I come in contact with. It's just a different vibration that I feel inside as opposed to before, where, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna live, I'm still gonna do the best I can, but I didn't have this ecstatic feeling that I have inside every day.
You can't ever go back and change things, And she was so elegant in the way she met each of her hurdles. Of course, there were times she was pissed, right? And it was like, whoa, because she was the person who was like, why me? I was so healthy until I got cancer. What I got to witness with Dory is, even though she eventually lost her life from this process, she had one of the most amazing healings throughout the journey. She died in such a healthy, vital, vigorous, profound way that impacted everyone in her wake.
I think that an area in any type of oncology setting that you want to think about that is easy to overlook and in some cases is aggressively downplayed is the connection between the mind and the body. Drug therapies that they study in a person who feels that they are in charge regardless of what the disease is, the drug therapies work better and more efficiently. Their quality of life improves, all these things. They might say, well, you do want to maintain a positive outlook, but you're not going to think your way out of cancer, for example, something like that. Well, it's not that simple. The way that person carries themselves, the mental image that they have of how they're doing and how they're going to do makes a huge difference in the ability of their body to accept treatments, their body to heal when it needs to heal.
Especially because people have this distinct image of like, the cancer's right here in my breast and it's, attacking me. When in reality, the cancer has found a void of you. There's a vacuum within you that has no self-identity, and the cancer has filled it. You have been so vacant from your own space that you've left the opportunity for this biologic process to get a foothold and fill the space. And so instead of being angry and being in a warlike attitude towards this cancer, to shift that and be like, oh my gosh, this is like the best friend that comes when you're all up in your head and you're so screwed up on life and you can't figure out your priorities, and your friend comes and says, you just need to come out and have a drink with me. And after 2 hours of a little space with your friend, you realize you were all up in your head and you just needed to be reminded that you weren't present here. The tumor's literally a friend coming along saying, what are you doing?
We treat it as an enemy, and yet really it's just an expression of a broken terrain that needs our attention. We're hopeful that this is where we get to take this now, that patients can, even if they know, hey, I've got a flip of a coin chance of having cancer in my lifetime, but now they can go at it not being afraid. Now they can realize, oh, this is just like any other managed disease process, like diabetes or something. Great. What do I need to do to prevent that? What do I need to do to treat it? What do I need to do to clean up my environment to be less hospitable to these conditions? We can come at it so much more elegantly and so much more refined and so much more precise. Today, with technologies like AI, we can scale it. Because what I'm sharing feels overwhelming for most clinicians when they hear this, the detail that goes into it. But when it starts to become automated, when it's got rules-based engine based on my 30 years of experience and now dozens of other doctors who've contributed to the hive mind of looking at the body through a different lens and looking at health creation and disease prevention through a different lens.
I don't think that the people that were trained in the system are bad people. I think they don't realize that they are part of a marketing funnel. They don't realize that the current scientific community is a marketing arm for big food and big pharma, period.
What I would often hear, and we still hear this, is, well, why wouldn't I have heard about what you do already? Well, there's no large funder for what we do. There's no big money behind it. People are much more empowered to look for answers themselves. So they may go to the oncologist. Oncologist is asked, is there anything else I can do? What about integrated medicine? They'll say, no, there's probably nothing to that. There's no science. So the patient's going to go home and look it all up anyway.
And I think more and more doctors are really waking up to this reality that they've been duped. They've been duped by the medical training. They've been duped by the pharmaceutical companies that control the medical education. And they are understanding they went into medicine to help people and they realized they're not helping people. They are looking for real solutions, and I think that we are on the absolute tidal wave of change.
How have we been told that there are no cures for cancer in our lifetime? There are no cures for cancer. If we ever found one, everybody would know about it. And as I began to learn about natural medicine, I realized there are hundreds, if not thousands, of ways to reverse cancer. Like, how did we not know this? And so, here I am trying to tell the world in my own way, there are so many cures for diseases. Look, you don't have to go. And they're like, oh, that's the craziest thing ever, because if that were the case, everybody would know about it beyond the evening news. Today, when does the doctor get paid? Only when you're sick. If you weren't sick, who's going to go to the doctor, right?
I mean, chronic disease is not red or blue or purple. This is an American problem. We're the sickest country in the world. We're the richest country in the world. How does that happen? We have a national emergency. We really are about to see massive catastrophe, both in terms of the economic impact, the social impact, the global competitiveness impact, national security impact. We've got to act. And so this is this crisis moment. And right now there's a new sheriff in town, President Trump, and a new deputy sheriff, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's head of Health and Human Services, who's come into town to try to change things.
We know, I think everyone out there knows, we could have a better world in a lot of ways. We could be healthier. We could have better healthcare systems. But what would constitute those? Well, that's what I believe he's looking for with an open mind, not trying to take sides, but looking for what scientifically we can show can help us be healthier.
In theory, if everything worked in theory, then in theory, having strict regulations is exactly what we need, right? We need to have more regulations. Can't just put this in the food and put that in the water and do all these things, because that's could be harmful to our health. So if anything, we need to remove the corruption and have stricter regulations. And that's my hope with RFK, is that he's able to remove corruption. It should not be so difficult to be able to do good clinical research and have good clinical studies.
Time will tell. Time will tell what he does and what he's able to do. The pharmaceutical industry is not going to go away quietly. Big food, big ag, big pharma, they're not going to go away quietly. So we'll see how this all plays out. But at this point, I've got trust and faith in Bobby Kennedy that he's going to do the right thing. He's going to continue to push.
Before the MAHA movement, no one really knew about seed oils. No one knew about the fluoride in the water. No one really knew about glyphosate or all the food dyes, all the additives and things like that. Just more awareness. And I'd love to see more alternative media sharing about natural cancer cures, because I've been doing this for 16 years now and I've seen thousands of people heal from cancer effectively. More people who are bold to speak about this, who are showing testimonials of people who are healing cancer and just making that more mainstream.
Making America healthy again is going to come down to you as an individual. All of us need to do our own due diligence and look at what information is available to you. I'm seeing huge shifts with what people are demanding. People just aren't okay with going to their medical doctor and leaving with a script. They want to know what's really wrong with me.
I've seen thousands of these documents from patients bringing them to my office saying, well, the doctor says it's normal. They literally have a piece of paper that says normal. Our labs are based on the average of the population, and we're not normal, and we're not healthy. So you don't want to be normal. You want to be an outlier. You want to be abnormal in the best way possible, and that you want to be more of a disease resistance or resilience versus just being the status quo waiting for the inevitable to happen. We're a disease management society, not a health creation society. And if we keep going after it like it's something outside of us that needs to be conquered, or that it's just something that needs to be medicated, we miss an opportunity to help people understand that health starts within, on all levels of our being, from that micro of our mitochondria and the extracellular matrix around those cells, to how those cells communicate with neighboring cells, to the tissues they communicate with, to the organs. We missed so many opportunities along the way that we could have taken a very different road. And yet here we are. And the beauty is, I feel like for the first time in my career, I feel like people are finally asking the right questions. And maybe we finally have an opportunity to maybe trace back some of our paths and take a different one forward.
Can we light within ourselves the model of health, which then can proliferate across our communities around the world? Can we see President Trump and Secretary Kennedy not as the heroes and the saviors, but as the people who are opening up the aperture of possibility so that we, the people, can step into our rightful positions? The moment we have in the Maha movement right now is the moment to awaken within ourselves our best expression. Allow this moment to be a moment where we instill within ourselves the rekindling of our own internal fire, so that the fire that we have starts emanating and thereby enabling others to kindle their own fires, because it turns out that if we use this moment correctly, we can see it as a catalyst, not the culmination of a series of long overdue events. And I'm not suggesting that those aren't there, but the movement has to persist long after all of these characters go away. Then we, the people, have to take the steps required to build the momentum that allows this to continue.
There's a paradox that was shared by the Dalai Lama when he said there's a paradox in our history and time. We have taller buildings, but shorter tempers. Wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy it less. We have more medicine, but less wellness. And we've learned how to make a living and not a life. And we've added years to life, not life to years. When I work with people now, I try to remind them that the best medicine is themselves, that you are your best medicine. How you choose to live your life can be medicine. So what choice will you make?
I have seen chemotherapy heal patients. Better said, I've seen patients heal within the context of chemotherapy. But I've also seen that exact same chemotherapy for that exact same tumor kill somebody very quickly. And so the difference, I believe, comes down to what have you reached for that tool to do? If you're reaching for the tool of chemo, surgery, radiation, for fear and desperation, your chance of survival is extremely low. If you instead come in a sense of power, of I am a light force, I am a force of life that is so much greater than anything in this exam room or this operating room or this CT scan, I literally glow with joy, with love for my family, for life itself. Maybe I'm depressed and that glow is diminished, but I remember having that glow. I remember being a child running down a mountain. I remember swimming, for the first time effectively. I remember riding my bike for the first time. I remember these things of massive joy, and that's me. And I'm now starting to dissect away all of that And now I'm gonna go and realizing that I have 50 trillion healthy cells that just need a little space away from this injured cell population, I just am gonna use this chemotherapy for a moment to knock that down, and then I'm gonna surge. Totally different paradigm. Why am I here at all? Why am I even sitting in this chair, listening to a doctor give me a diagnosis and a prognosis and a list of drugs and risk reductions and blah, 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 blah. How did I get here? If we are gonna go and embark on a physician's journey of healing our patients, then we better make sure that we do a parallel macro story and macro journey with them, because if we heal more patients, if we reduce the amount of chronic disease, if we improve the rate of fertility on this planet, and we don't change our macro behavior, we all disappear faster. The planet disappears faster. And so the journey that we have right now as a science community, as a consumer community, as a patient population, is to completely redefine not the story of cancer, but the story of life and what life connected would look like. And if we can connect a cell back to its original organism, it immediately eliminates itself to allow a stem cell to come in and regrow healthy tissue and expand into a more vibrant, more healthy human being on the flip side of that. If we can come to terms with what we are as a species, and we come to that moment of realization and we plug back into Mother Nature and we overcome the cancer-like behavior of civilization itself. It's one of the two now, and we're down to decades left to find out which way it tips. I'm glad to be alive. I'm so glad that everybody in the audience is contributing to a hyper-intelligence right now as we pause, take a moment, and agree that we're alive, and we're vibrant, and we're on purpose.
In making that chapter, I learned so much I wish I'd known years ago. I hope you learned a lot too. As you know, this chapter of MAHA Uncensored was personal for me. I think my biggest takeaway is that through modern medicine, we have been misled into declaring war on cancer, when in fact, those cancer cells are our cells. They inhabit our bodies. They're not the product of bad luck, they're the product of bad terrain, and you can change terrain. I was also struck by the fact that we've known about this for nearly a century. But that's the tragedy and truth about medicine. It hadn't just bankrupted us or lied to us, it's also kept real alternatives from us. Maybe out of ignorance, maybe out of arrogance, but often out of sheer greed. And we must not allow that any longer. If you've enjoyed this free broadcast of MAHA Uncensored so far, I encourage you to put your support behind us by purchasing the full film at the offer below. You'll get the entire 16-chapter documentary. We've got a great discount if you take action right now. As a special thank you, we've also included hundreds of dollars in bonuses and free gifts, including audio versions and full transcripts for each chapter. You can also get our 149-page viewer's guide, as well as the MAHA Movie Cookbook, uncut interviews from the film, and a ton more. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow for our next chapter, The Brain Under Siege.